Yep, so I'm Brett with Founders Brewing Company, and pretty much today I want to tell the story of, representing brewers, craft brewers in particular, and our journey through being a business and trying to implement sustainable initiatives into practice. So, looks like my slide's a little goofy here, sorry about that, but here are a few of the buzzwords, we'll call them, and that's not the first pun you're going to hear today, but brewers are in particular interested in a lot of these things because they reduce consumption of resources, and they really help drive up efficiency. Now you might think that that's enough because also in the room we're all sustainability minded people, but really why else might we all do this? Well, the triple bottom line, and it's not the first time you've heard that today, but it is one of the driving factors. It's people, planet, and profits. We all know that. I have a point at the bottom here. The fear of consequence for refusal to change, and that's really alludes to my story for the end of my presentation about water and wastewater and the reason we may or may not have to treat that. Again, refusal to change is often the driving consequence too. So where to begin? When you're looking to implement some sustainability-minded initiatives, you kind of got to take a look at yourself, your identity, and what your business is. And make no mistake, we are brewers first and foremost. So the quality of that beer that we're going to drink after this is all said and done, that's of critical importance, okay? Nothing matters ahead of that. But we get it. Making beer in particular is a resource-intensive process. I'm unapologetic about that. Unfortunately, maybe it takes a lot of resources to make great beer, in particular water I mentioned there. It takes great water to make great beer. So we have a vested interest in making sure that our supply chain sustains itself as well. So when we look at us as a company trying to develop this position or this team for sustainability, you see across the industry that it's increasingly common to have an official position that's dedicated to adopting and developing sustainability type initiatives. A manager, a coordinator, a director of sustainable operations, a lot of breweries like Sierra Nevada, New Belgium, Bell, some of the larger ones, they all have this. However, when one person isn't enough and it takes a whole team, you get what Founders has. And we've aptly named ourselves Strike Force Green. We're a team, a volunteer team, and we've attempted to select an individual from every one of our departments in the brewery, whether it be brewing and packaging, to admin, to deli, and our tap room, things like that. And we all get together on a routine basis, and we've kind of set goals for ourselves. We've developed a mission statement to try to guide what our values are going to be. How do we want to manage this undertaking of getting our brewery to optimize and be sustainable from that perspective. And you're not really a group unless you have a t-shirt, so I didn't wear the t-shirt, but I wanted to show a picture of what it was. What else might we do? So we need to figure out where we are as an industry or relative to our industry. So we got to ask questions and set those benchmarks. Data collection, how much are we using? Well, how much water does it take to make our beer? How much waste are we discharging? What kind of power consumption do we have, whether it be electrical or natural gas? Solid waste recycling, do we have room to have composting? Is that a viable solution? How about landfill diversion? Okay, so we start asking these questions, we gather data, and we come to the conclusion that this is why some breweries elect to have a full-time position to do this. However, we're not without help. We have a Brewers Association, which is a professional body that has resources available to brewers who are members to kind of help put these programs together. One of them being sustainability manuals. They've created these and they have since revised them. And what they do is they highlight per barrel of beer that a brewery will make really where they should attempt to benchmark in terms of resource consumption, all the resources that I mentioned just a second ago. And they have strategies on improving efficiencies and really optimizing any of those manufacturing processes. So they've got one for each major stream of resource consumption. We've got water and wastewater, energy usage, and then recycling and diverting from landfill. So those have been particularly helpful for me, trying to help bring this program into the light and get it fully functioning around the brewery as a whole. So where do we stand? Compared to our industry brethren, now again, this is not necessarily controlled for size, so a lot of these metrics, it seems like we're doing quite well, but economy of scale is largely responsible for that. So for water, 7 to 10 barrels of water per barrel of beer sold, that's a pretty typical use rate for a lot of brewers. We're just under 4. That is actually considered world class, so we're very proud of that measure. Again, economy of scale is most important for that. We make a lot of beer now relative to somebody making a much smaller amount, say, 10 to 15,000 barrels a year. We make about 200,000 barrels a year, to put things in perspective for you. And electricity, again, we're quite in the middle of that range. It does take a lot of electricity, just like it does water, to create beer. And natural gas, we're doing quite well again, and that put at the bottom there to credit boiler efficiency, things like fermentation, heat reclaim, and a vapor condenser, which I'll describe those in a little bit better detail as we go on. So we put this around the brewery. This is a graphic. We had a poster made up. We've got some pretty talented folks in our marketing department who lended a hand. And it really, again, it highlights our mission and vision so that we can get folks on board around the brewery itself. We do have passionate individuals. We just need to figure out how to engage them. And to start that, we've got to present the information to them and then make it relatable as well. It's not very easy to see, but for the water graphic, how much water we saved in 2014 relative to 2013 was put in terms of how many gallons that is. And it's about 1.5 million gallons is what we saved between 2013 and 2014. The actual change in per barrel consumption was not that large, but that's something that kind of drives home and, again, makes it relatable. And we can get everybody on board to changing practices, whether it's rinsing tanks, rinsing parts, using water in many of the ways that we do, making sure that we're most efficient there and not wasteful. So to put it all together, the first thing you need to do is have a team, in our case, or at least a dedicated personnel with which to task these types of things. They won't get themselves done. Now, as a business, it's in our interest fundamentally and inherently to have the most optimized process. But again, we want to do it with sustainability in mind too, because we do care and we want to be responsible stewards of the environment as well. The next step is to figure out, using performance benchmarks, where you are and where you think you can be. Set goals from that. And then really these last two are quite important. Make sure that any and all solutions satisfy the bottom line. Does it make good business sense and being the right thing to do? Those are critical questions to ask. I feel like I'm cut off pretty at the bottom there, so sorry about that. But address the low-hanging fruit first, and that's not the first time you've heard that today as well. When implementing any kind of sustainability type initiatives, you want to ask yourselves, for a brewery, it might be a popular decision to think about solar panels as a way to capture heat, maybe drive electricity. That's a very large capital investment. Does that make sense to do when you could simply replace light bulbs, incandescent, high energy using light bulbs, with compact fluorescents? Maybe that makes a lot more sense without all that capital investment required up front. So beer's silver lining. Now, this isn't something that Coors developed to keep your beer as cold as the Rockies. This is just another one of my puns. Even though, again, that we require so many resources to make the beer that we do, a lot of these are inherently sustainable. And by that I mean, number one, boiling wort. Boiling wort is required to sterilize our beer. It's also required for the flavor profile we're going for a given beer. However, in that boiling, we get steam. Steam is a natural component of boiling. Well, steam can be condensed and saved as hot water. Now, any brewer will tell you that hot water is one of our most critical resources around a brewery. So a way to have that sustain itself without the addition of additional hot water and steam, that's a great savings there. Fermentation. Fermentation has a byproduct of heat, okay? Now, it takes sugars, and using yeast creates alcohol. When this process happens, the heat is reclaimed and repurposed and can actually heat our brewery, which is quite nice. We had a 30% drop in our energy consumption as a brewery during the cold months of the year, simply by recapturing the heat that fermentation was making anyways. So that's pretty great. And the bottom one, again, cut off. Sorry about that. But spent grain, and this is something all brewers are really experimenting with. The sugars from grains that we use to make beer are derived and they're used up, but there's still a lot of protein and a lot of other nutrients available in these grains. These grains can be collected and sold to farmers, and they can be used as cattle feed. Protein is the most important nutrient that cattle need in their diet. So that's another great way to create inherently sustainable practices out of basically our byproducts. Wastewater treatment, I alluded to a little bit earlier. I wanted to tell a story of what we've had going on in our history. Brewing wastewater, which is our effluent, very much loaded with biological and chemically active compounds. Again, for a waste treatment center, there's a lot of required treatment that goes on. This is very difficult to remove. Not all municipalities have been aware of our influence on wastewater as a brewery. However, this has changed. In the past, only large-scale production brewers were typically required to treat their effluent, these being Anheuser-Busch, Miller Coolers, things like that. However, because more municipalities' wastewater treatment centers have become aware of the very biologically active loads that we've given, even small, really small breweries are required to pre-treat their waste before discharging it to drain. And this is a problem. If you don't do this, there's likelihood that you will get surcharges from the city, which are very costly. Your third option is to not put it down the drain at all, which is where Founders has decided they want to go. However, we are an urban brewer. We're basically right in the heart of downtown. We've got a lot of challenges inherent to us being an urban brewer with a very limited footprint. Wastewater treatment facilities are typically large. They need a lot of space to be built, and more importantly, they stink. To put it like they generate a lot of odors because it's our waste being processed. So what our idea is to not have it put it down the drain at all. We are engaging in something that's called waste diversion. So we have very little going down the drain at all that is biologically or chemically active. So what we're doing is we're recapturing this. I've got a few pictures here that shows a pump and a fermenter. So typically in a brewery, you walk through it and you would see a hose at the bottom of a fermenter just like that. However, it'd be going to drain if the brewer is fortunate enough to have a trench drain, and that fermentation byproduct or discharge would be just going down the drain, and that's how you would deal with it. That's how you remove it from your product stream. That's how you remove it from your brewery. And this is no longer a viable option for many breweries these days, even small ones, and certainly not Founders. So what we have is we have a dedicated system of pumps, pipe headers, and a centralized tank meant to divert all this waste, and then we actually discharge it out. Picture on the left for you guys is a discharge panel. A tanker truck will come, and they will actually pump out all that liquid waste, and it can be repurposed for various things. And that is a picture of our centralized tank on the right for you guys. So waste actually is a misnomer. There are a lot of potential uses for it. It's brewing and it's fermentation byproduct, and now these generate revenue, as we've come to find out even. So there's alcohol that is tied up in a lot of brewery effluent, and as a byproduct from fermentation. So this can actually become fuel ethanol as a source. The E85 that you guys are probably familiar with can be in your cars. That can potentially be sourced from brewing effluent. Also, as I mentioned earlier, spent grain, the loads from fermentation also are loaded with nutrients, protein, B vitamins, things like that. Pet food, livestock, it's a great addition for that too. And again, can generate revenue for a brewery as well. And it doesn't go to landfill, and wastewater treatment centers do not have to process it. So in closing, we understand that this is a resource intensive process again, but there is a lot of capacity in our industry in particular to generate sustainable practice. Our patrons and our customers, they can demand it. They demand already the highest quality beer from us. Simply all they need to do at this point is demand that the environmental practices we engage into are optimized just like the way we make beer. So let's adopt this as environmental stewards, and we'll continue to make great beer and reduce our footprint every year. And that's our plan. Cheers, everyone.